is Kay Behrensmeyer. I've been here for 31 years, doing wonderful, happy work at the Natural History Museum. I'm going to talk to you about the kind of long-term study that working here makes possible. My question involves taphonomy and how information is preserved in the fossil record, because you've all heard that there's very poor fossil record for much of time, and yet some parts of it are very, very good. So taphonomy is the study of the transition of organic remains from biosphere to lithosphere. This is a very complicated diagram, but I'm going to take you quickly through what I have found out from looking at a modern biosphere in Africa, the processes of death, their filters on each of these stages, and right into the buried remains. How much and what kind of information survives through to get into the potential fossil record. The study site is Amboseli Park in Kenya, just north of Mount Kilimanjaro. It's a subtropical or a tropical semi-arid equatorial system. The green you see there are, those are swamps, permanent water coming from Kilimanjaro filtering down through the mountain. Here it is. And you can see the different habitats. And it has the usual complement of large African herbivores and carnivores. Now, what made this study so special is that I was able to collaborate with David Western, who's done air census on the living, and then all I had to do was go out and compare what was living with counts of the dead on the ground surface. We did this by establishing transects and going back year after year, not every year in that 35 years, but basically recording what was going on with the bones while David Western was recording what was going on with the living. And this is one of the transects along a channel showing the different kinds of animals that we encountered in the death assemblage. Now, very quickly, I want you just to look at this line comparing the proportion of dead. This is a sample of 1,502 individuals compared with the proportion of live, where his combined sample over 30 years was about 170,000. It's a very small sample compared with a very big one, but it's almost a one-to-one correlation. Here's wildebeest, zebra, Grant's gazelle, even ostrich in here, which of course is a surviving dinosaur by some people's estimation, and warthog, rhino. This shows that there is pretty much a one-to-one correlation in the numbers of bones of zebra and wildebeest and all you find, and their proportions in the living population. This is like a Rosetta Stone, because then you can go back to the fossil record and you can say, well, the proportions of the different animals that I'm seeing in the fossil assemblage actually could represent what was living on that land surface. And one of the major processes in this ecosystem for bone destruction are hyenas. They can chew up bones just to almost nothing. They like them almost like potato chips. And so looking at 3 samples through time, in 1975 we had these bones per individual, 25 bones per individual carcass that we found. And in 2010, also pretty complete for these 2 animals. And here's an anomaly. Well, the population of hyenas went way up at that point, and they were destroying up to 75% of the bones that we had seen previously in the continuing death assemblage. So that's a signal of very different predator pressure on the bone assemblage, and of course the fossil record would preferentially sample these times with more complete material than the times when the hyenas were dominant. This is another graph showing change through time. Here's 1970s, there were 29 species in these resampled transects. This is called a rarefaction curve, where you increase the sample and it's leveling out at about 30 species. And in 2000s, it's leveling out at a lower level. Well, this also goes along, this is the bone assemblage, but it goes along with what David Western was seeing in the living populations. This park has lost a lot of its woodland. It's turned into grassland. It's got lower diversity. So the bone assemblage can record this kind of change as well. Now, of course, it's on the surface. So we were looking at the bones that were 50 to 99% buried as the ones that were moving into the buried population that would be more likely to become a fossil record. And so 4% of those surveyed bones are moving into the earth and becoming preserved. And they actually also very faithfully reflect what was going on in the living populations, even though it's a much smaller sample. Most bones are destroyed by weathering in Amboseli. We've marked carcasses and picked up ribs from them over years. So you see about 10 years it takes from a fresh rib to turn into fragments, unless it's buried. And this is just one of the buried ones. And it doesn't even have to be buried to mineralize. I picked up this toe bone from a wildebeest. I thought it felt a little heavy. It was unweathered. Thin sectioned it, and I was able to see that calcium carbonate from this pond situation was already preserving it within probably a year or two. So Amboseli's bones show that the dead are reliable proxies for the living community. And in spite of the complexity of all these recycling processes on this diagram, there is untapped ecological information in the vertebrate fossil record that we're just now poised to start uncovering. Thanks. Yes?
What percentage of your animals are dying naturally versus human agency, and does that affect your taphonomic reasoning at all?
Question is, how many of the animals are dying naturally as opposed to human agency? All of them are dying naturally except for a few elephants that and the rhinos, which were poached and came into the park and died. But hunting is not allowed in this system. So the death rate fluctuates according to drought cycles. So during more drought conditions, you get a lot more complete carcasses and more animals of particular kinds dying. But it's all pretty much a natural system. So it should be free of much human intervention.